All right. So if you'd like a link to join this hangout, I know that it's at a weird time because it's Monday and a lot of people do work on Mondays. I happen to be off on Monday. My schedule is like one off. My weekend is Sunday and Monday. So that's how you end up with Monday. Plus, not very many people stream on Monday. So there's that as well. I wanted to discuss a couple things, but first, I wanted to discuss, like, maybe if I could get a group of people that were willing to discuss where their boundaries are, how far they're willing to go, and why those lines exist. Um, and so I was gonna maybe discuss some examples for me of kind of like how I draw a line and how far I go. Maybe it would be interesting to see if other people could share what they might. Draw their lines from and how far they will go. So like there's external boundaries that we create and there's internal ones, right? So the external boundaries that we create are how much time we give to somebody, what they are and are not allowed to say to you and treat you. The external boundary of how much information you want to give people. Those are external boundaries that we create, and they're healthy and they're good. And so if somebody mistreats you on the internet, a lot of times we exert our healthy external boundaries by saying, hey, that's not okay. And how you do that, it depends on the person, and everybody has their different set rules. So eye for an eye, some people do that. Other people rise above the discourse as like Shannon Q kind of goes about and tries to not go eye for eye as much. Um, and so like how you do that is super fascinating to me. And so if you'd like to discuss that, I'm totally open to discussing it. Um, so I'll tell you something from my um, experience, and I can only speak for myself in this way. Shanny for Christ is somebody I famously do internet battles with, and um, where I draw the line with her is particular, I guess. So, like for instance, with Shanny for Christ. I have returned like for like, insult for insult, blow for blow to some extent. But there are lines that I just don't cross, even if she crosses them. So, for instance, a line that I've never crossed for Shanny for Christ is um, she has a traumatic story of a sexual assault that happened when she was 16. And because Shanny is so histrionic and so overboard, it's very easy to dismiss this and say, "Oh, this didn't happen. This is not. This isn't real. She's a chronic liar," right? So I draw the line for me, and I say, I'm not willing to go there. I'm going to put that in skeptical, situation. Let's get more information. Well, it turns out as we got more information from Shanny's mom, that story actually rang up to be true. And so, with the information given, it's off limits for me to touch that subject with her, if that makes sense. I don't think bringing up somebody's real trauma is fair game in that case. So I leave that alone. Fast forward though in history, Shanny decides, well, hey, uh, as retaliation for Spackle saying that I'm mistreating my kids by screaming, eat cereal instead of actually feeding them a dinner. And as retaliation for saying, hey, you ought not to be hotboxing with your kids. And as retaliation for me saying, hey, instead of saying, like, I'm going to kill myself, I just want to die constantly on the internet, perhaps you need a therapist. Otherwise, I'm going to have no choice to call the police if you keep threatening suicide. As retaliation for that, Shanny took the side of um, calling me a pedo, which was ridiculous and upsetting to me only because, that's disgusting. And also, I care about tiny humans, and I just think it's vile and disgusting. And as somebody that has suffered some abuse, I just find it especially abhorrent. So with that, she crossed a line that she knows that I won't go to. She knows that as much as I'll exchange blow for blow, there are some lows that I just don't stoop to. And with that, like, that's a personal low. Like, calling someone something like that without actual evidence is a low that I just won't go to. So my question is, so some folks, it's going to open up a panel if you are willing to talk about some of your lines that you draw and why you draw them, and where that is for you. Some of it for me is what kind of society I want to look into. What kind of community do I want to be in? And if I want to be in a community that doxes, then I would dox. But I don't want to be in a community that doxes. Like, it's something that I don't want. I don't want to have a community that is that vicious. What does that say about my character if I do that? So if you return like for like, it kind of depends on the situation, right? So I was curious to know if other people had boundaries that they have considered online and where they draw them. Recently, there was somebody that had arguably a mental breakdown online, maybe perhaps a manic episode. That person was clipped in a video where they just saw the hysteria online, like the live hysteria. So my question to that would be, there's no catalyst for what's behind that. There's no showing of why that person reacted the way they did. So it's unfair to showcase it without the why, is it not? To me, it isn't. So what's interesting is we do have a lot of folks that do suffer from mental illness. And we do battle with those folks. Some of us do struggle with mental illness and do work hard to maintain our mental wellness. And so what's interesting is we have some folks that use mental illness as a shield and cudgel, and we're very sensitive about that, right? So Theo, you're definitely invited to come on in and talk if you'd like. So some of us create a pushback to that, right? For instance, Shanny, for instance, uses mental illness as a shield and cudgel all the time. My borderline disorder, and then she excuses some of her most malicious accusations against me as, well, I'm borderline, and because I'm borderline, this is how I react to this sort of stress. And for me, it's fair game to shut it down any way I can. And so for some reason, if that is like used that way, then yeah, it is absolutely frustrating, especially for folks that deal with that. So my line of thinking is, for myself, is this a pattern or a one-off? So let me tell you a story about in the G+ community. In the G+ community, we had a gentleman named Benny, who was a very handsome, fairly well-liked guy, generally had a gentle speaking voice, very calm, seemed very thoughtful, was in a lot of intellectual discussions. One day, Benny had this snap. And what's fascinating is some people in the community knew Benny enough and cared enough to be like, this is not the normal Benny that we know. And they actually ended up reaching out to him and trying to figure out what is going on. So in that time period, Benny became incredibly paranoid, attacked everybody, was in everybody's DMs, and was flailing around with government conspiracy theories and extreme notions, right? There was an attempt to actually help him. And I think in the beginning with Shanny, there was an attempt to actually help her. But my question is, if somebody has a one-off situation, are we now moving forward to going to our default, which is now we're doing battle with the Shannys, the Vaughns, who have this long history of being horrible. So like it's not just a one-off or a bad situation or a couple of bad months. This is years and years and years of collective abuse, and people are sick of it. And being mentally ill does not give you a card to abuse. So um, people push back on that. So some folks are asking, well, what's the difference between, this is actually a really fair question. I disagree that it's unfair. If it's unfair to point out that, like, for instance, the Stitchy situation or the Benny situation, if it's unfair to highlight those without a context, is it unfair to do that with Shanny Vaughn emo? Well, that's a good question. So I actually stay away from emo because, well, for one, I think there's something that's especially cognitively unaware with him. He's especially out there. And for Vaughn, there is a absolute cruelty to Vaughn that I think can be addressed, and it's been years and years of both lies, but also knowing how he is as to his children. I think that it is fair to criticize Vaughn. I think it is fair to criticize Shanny. However, I would say, and originally, my default was not to do that. I think a lot of people's defaults were also not to criticize Shanny. I remember folks that would leave Shanny alone due to her obvious mental illness, due to the fact that she was incredibly emotional, constantly out of control. And so with that, there was some there was some leniency given to Shanny in the beginning, and people actually did try to reach out and help with that. I'm wondering sometimes if, because we are burned by the folks like Shanny, where people did make an attempt to be kind, did make an attempt to reach out, that now perhaps our default now is to do immediate battle with them. And so um, also, there are other lines too that I would be totally willing to discuss. One would also be uh, doxing, threats of doxing. If somebody doxes you, should you dox them back? Stuff like that. I think that's an interesting one. So if you're interested in having that discussion, I do have an invite link, and let me know if you'd like to discuss it. All right, we have a zebra. Zebra, you have a mic?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I almost always only see you in chat, so I'm impressed that you mic'd up. That's amazing.
Oh, hey, what's up with you?
I'm doing okay. I'm off on Mondays, so I thought I'd do a stream. And before people get really defensive over the folks that did do battle with Stitchy, actually, I support Burnt Toast pushing back. Uh, I don't think anybody deserves to get abused or lied about. I think you can push back. But I was wondering, where are the lines for folks of how far do you push, and what do you highlight?
Well, that's a good question. But for the record, Stitchy, is that the same as Stinky for Von Helton, or is Stitchy someone else?
That's somebody else. That's
Okay.
that's one person with a recent incident. But because that person is kind of a new one-off, it's
Let's keep
interesting.
their identity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I find weird about boundaries is that it's almost as if the person whose bad behavior you're criticizing is trying to stretch those boundaries. They're always trying to one up you. For example, accusing you of child molestation. I think she did that, as I recall.
Shanny did. Right. Shanny called
Yeah,
me a pedo in response to me saying you ought not to hotbox with your kids, and also if you commit, say that you're going to kill yourself, constantly on stream, we're going to have no choice but to call the cops. And then, CPS is going to be involved with your kids. And that was
yes,
highlighted by Godless Girl as me calling CPS. And that was back in 2016 or so. And her response video was that, I'm a pedo. And
yeah.
so, like, the question is, how far and low do you go in response to a response like that, right?
Yes, because that's beyond bad parenting. It is out and out abuse, even though the kids may not be the target. We all have memories of, say, our parents fighting, and the pain you feel inside as a kid just hearing it. And but to have your mother talk about offing herself in front of her kids is so above and beyond. They're pushing the envelope for us, and it takes a great deal of restraint to not go one better. It seems like if someone throws a punch, you should throw a harder punch. And of course, maybe with Shani, it's not good for her to do that, and maybe it's not good for us to do that as well. To If we go too far, we lose a little bit of our humanity or perhaps zebraness. But I had an interesting experience with Rev where I had his attention in chat and I asked a question, and Shani's trial and his trial were sort of coming up, and I asked a question that had the are you going to take a different legal strategy now that you've found out that your court case will be on court TV? And Rev is shocked. Court TV? What? And I enjoyed doing it because it set him off into a panic that he was going to be on court TV. Um, so for a split second, he believed it. But so for me, practical jokes like that that's a boundary I'm willing to cross. But I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'd threaten to call the police, but I certainly would call the police if I felt the issue was important. Sorry, I've talked a long time. Back to you.
Oh no, no. It's interesting because like there are things that I do in retaliation, like like a punch for a punch, and that's a line that some folks say that they wouldn't cross.
Mm,
They say, "Oh, that doesn't elevate discourse. You ought to leave them alone." And so like it's been making me think about like where are my lines? Why are they there? Why don't I cross certain lines, and what is the difference? So like for instance, Shani's a really good example. So like being
hmm
that she's so highlighted, right?
Yes.
Um, like the 16-year-old issue, like where she was attacked at 16, was a hands-off issue for me, because it seemed like that was a catalyst for her trauma and a catalyst for partially why she is the way she is. At the same time, her attack at the police department, saying that the Boulder police somehow, committed, SA against her,
Yeah.
and that long video, that was fair game to me. And I think the reason is because one seemed like it was just completely provable lie. Like there's just no way that it happens that way. And if I was to do the most charitable version of what she was trying to explain, I found that sometimes some folks that experience trauma, when they go through something like a gynecological exam, I just said that wrong, but when you go to the gyno,
Yes.
and it's intimate and people are in your space and you really don't want them, there are people that break down crying because they feel like it's like happening all over, it triggers something. It could be possible in the most charitable version of that, that maybe she was triggered because they do
I
strip you.
imagine. I think something that's kind of
Go ahead. You're muted, Zebra. I can't hear you.
we can you still hear me there, Spackle?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Something that I find sinister about dealing with Shanny and Rev and their bad behavior is that if you are provoked, if they provoke you with more bad behavior, the sinister thing is that it wants to make you take your own standards and throw them out the window. So, for example, I'm kind of fat, and while I think I have the freedom to make fat jokes. I generally don't because it seems a bit of a low blow. But I make an exception for Shanny because I think it's fucking hilarious. But so I've tossed out some of my boundaries with Shanny, and I'm wondering, hey, does that make me a hypocrite? I should be more careful. It's sort of like, for example, you might be against the death penalty, but some crimes are so hideous that you want to blow right past the death penalty and set up systems of torture because some crimes are just so vile. And in order to deal with certain people, it's tempting to throw your own humanity out the window if you're not careful. And Shani, seeing her and her kids trapped in that car going to Pennsylvania, and she'll be shouting and yapping incessantly, but she'll tell her kids to shut up at the first moment of one of them speaking. It's just kind of vile. I sometimes find myself just turning off, for example, Drag's reviews of Shanny, and I find I can only take so much. It starts out watching outrageous behavior, it gets worse and worse, and then we all engage in ridiculous, sarcastic comments, and then I feel a bad taste in my mouth and I have to leave. I don't know how. How do you feel about watching their antics? Does it make you feel the same way?
I think when I first started getting a little bit meaner on the internet, I think my default was I was really sweet and innocent. I was a little bit snarky, but overall really naive. And I think maybe the internet's ruined me. It's possible. But I was a lot sweeter back in the days. And now I'm told that I am sort of a shitlord for Jesus, is what somebody described me once. um, but it's interesting because I think my default is usually to give people some benefit of the doubt, usually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happened for me is that assumption of, I guess, social etiquette has bitten me over and over again. I'm wondering if some folks feel the same way, you know?
Well, I imagine many do. I think some people have just simply put have dropped the gloves, to use a hockey analogy, and are just going in for the kill sometimes when I see them making fun of Shanny in chat. And often I burst out laughing, and sometimes I can't take it and I have to go. The comments appearing on screen are really good. Do you have someone else waiting in the background to join us?
No, I had a feeling that it's going to be an off time, so there's a chance that people won't join. If people want to join and discuss this, I'm very interested, particularly if you are a reaction community member or somebody that tends to like to make a lot of comments and lay down the snark. I think it's interesting. I'd like to
Oh,
know
I
where
do a
people's
lot of shit
boundaries are.
talking.
Yeah,
I've been
I do
complimented
too.
for my shit talking, and but I'm not a producer as such, not the way you are, or burnt toast. That's remarkable work. I The only thing I do content wise is that on Wednesday nights I'm on Richard Madsen's show, but we just talk about religion mostly, and regular folks aren't part of. We're not going to say abusive things about Shanny there, so
Mhm.
it's not really an issue.
Right. Well, I think
The-
for me, like it's interesting because like sometimes you want to poke fun. If you don't poke fun at certain things, and it's
Mhm.
been there's a lot of people there's a lot of people who um are what you would consider white hat trolls or commenters, and they're very sarcastic, very witty, very funny.
Yeah.
And they're good people. And people that like are stupid about trolls don't seem to understand that there's actually trolls that are good. Um, but it's been my understanding, my experience that a lot of white hat trolls laugh at things because if you don't laugh at it, it's just fucking heartbreaking.
Yes.
And also, there's a certain point where after somebody does reach out and does try to legit help somebody or does try to redirect people, if they still are just cruel and horrible and abusive and stuff like that, there's nothing left to do but to mock them, is there not? Like, well,
Uh,
ignore them. You can try ignoring them, but we've tried that. That doesn't work.
yes, I've often chatted with G-Man, and I've noted that even though Drag is not talking about him at all, eventually G-Man brings up Drag and says all these things about him, and then Drag comes back and starts doing response videos. And I assume that Shanny is the same way. I'm not sure. The only one I know of who's gone radio silent is D-Roy, at least on the subject of Drag.
Yeah, I think D-Roy's kind of fled the scene. And he's got some abhorrent ideas, but at the same time, he hasn't done anything that I've witnessed that's the same level of Vaughn and Shanny, for instance. So,
Oh, Vaughn is an odd one. Strangely, I was on a stream with him, hosted by G-Man, about the moon landing, and I got this last minute notice. So I was on the side of saying, "Yeah, the moon landing happened," and apparently Vaughn doesn't believe it, and that was very strange to talk to him about it. Very absurd, and maybe the absurdity of all this angers people, and eventually they're going to lash out, especially if they're named. You managed to keep your cool at those accusations Shanny leveled against you. That's how I recall it. But how did you respond when that broke out?
I flagged your channel. I
Well,
mean,
good for you.
if you're gonna name my name
Yeah,
and throw an accusation out that is unfounded like that, I'm gonna flag the shit out of your channel. Uh,
good
and
for you.
I and that's my line. I don't flag. I don't false flag. So like if somebody says uploads a video and goes Spackle's an idiot,
Mm,
I'm not gonna be like, well, that's not cool.
mm.
Or you could even upload this video and go, this was the most stupidest conversation to have. You hypocrite. Okay, whatever. That's not cool. All right, whatever. I'm not gonna flag it.
Mm.
Opinions are totally fine. If you upload a lie or dox me, that is not like just a benign lie, but let's say it's something like that, something that grievous. I'm gonna flag the shit out of your channel. And that's
I
not
hope
false
you haven't
flagging.
been.
I think that's fucking fair.
Yes, and I hope you haven't been doxxed.
I have been.
Uh,
So Godless Girl, and I think all of us at some point, if you end up on YouTube and you show your face, end up doxxed. And this is
mm,
why I defend folks like Burnt Toast or Jules that hide their faces because, frankly, I was too naive to know differently. And yeah, Godless Girl made accusations and videos about me calling CPS on Shanny, and that was what, 2016 or so. And
ugh,
Sydney Winston put it all up and attached my name to it, and there it was. So I asked him to not do that for
mm.
obvious reasons. And it's interesting watching Sydney try to uh, backpedal now and be like Shanny bad after all that. But I think that is a form of doxing, trying to attach somebody's name to a lie or situation on purpose like that. I think that's unfortunate, but people do that. And it's a risk that you take if you ever go live. So note to self, or note to people that maybe are considering ever engaging with these sort of things, you might want to never show your face. like just for you. Like, I don't blame for people for hiding behind avatars and names and stuff like that, because unfortunately there's some real psychos out there.
Yes, there are. And speaking of psychos, there's a wonderful website out there called bigzebra.com, and people should visit it. How's that for shameless self promotion? I yeah, I just it seems that Shanny has, with her outrageous behavior and having that sort of strange relationship with Rev, it seems to have gathered a huge audience somehow. How many channels? Do we even know how many channels focus on Shanny? There are a lot of them.
I think
Um,
before, I want to say, um, like before, I mean, it started, I think, with glutes and like archive channels and some people randomly like, responding to her. And that was some years ago. And then it expanded to like this sea of people now. Like, I don't know. I couldn't even put a number on it because it's blown up so much, and particularly because it just grabbed recent momentum.
I wonder if it's led to more Christians supporting her, because for a lot of Christians, uh, the persecution complex really feeds their own satisfaction in their lot. I don't quite understand it psychologically. But of course, the New Testament is filled with stories about how you may be mocked as a Christian for espousing your beliefs. So,
Yeah. Well, what I would always say to that is you don't have to add offense to the gospel. I think the gospel's offensive enough. Especially if you believe in conditionalism and you're fundamentalist, but like any Christian, even a universalist, the gospel's offensive to folks that aren't a Christian. If they have
mhm.
another faith, or if they don't have a belief in a God, the gospel is offensive. So when you specifically add offense to the gospel, that's not martyrdom. That's you being a sinful dick. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, that's just literally what you're doing. So if you're a nasty Christian or a bad Christian, and then you try to preach the gospel, well, you're causing more offense. And if you want to win over hearts and minds, that wouldn't be the way to do it, would it?
No, no, and a lot of people who object to Shanny are Christians themselves, I assume. Uh, it's not just atheists having a go. Uh, I'm sure. The I was going to say something very witty, but it has left me for the moment. But do you have any particular outstanding Shanny moments that the crowd might be interested in? There's, of course, that.
Outstanding.
Well, for me, it was telling Rev, implying that he was going to be on court TV when he appeared in court. That's my Rev moment
Oh,
because it was so hilarious. But I'm
um,
just wondering if you must have a few choice stories that the audience would like to hear.
like of where my lines are or what I've done.
Well, not really just lines, just incidents. Like,
Lines and incidences. Well,
that's a little
fat.
off topic,
You
I
you
hope.
hit you hit fat shaming, and I can
Mm,
talk about myself. I don't want to do too heavy on other people,
yes.
because I think I would be interested in other people if they came in and talked about where their lines are. But fat shaming typically is not my default. So if I know that somebody's struggling with weight loss or they're really heavy, I feel for them because I know with every pound that they put on, it's so much harder to lose, and it is taking a toll on their body. They are in pain. I don't enjoy the weight that I put on. I'm 215 pounds. I'm 5'9". I'm overweight. I know I'm overweight. I'm thin boned, and it is causing me pain on my. And I'm trying to lose weight again, right? So I understand like the whole idea of like we ought not to body shame just for like the health of other people. At the same time, I also understand that there's an unhealthy adoption of being proud of your body no matter what state it is that has taken it so far that people are encouraging and enabling the most unhealthy behavior. So you
Right.
have people that are doing mukbangs that are 300 pounds,
Oh,
and
yes, I find that very odd.
and we're watching them kill themselves. And then if you say something like, dude, like this isn't good for you, like you're body shaming them. That's it, you know. And so like with Shanny, like the body shaming thing, I left alone until she body shamed me, until she said I weighed as much as she did and I was fat. Then it
Oh,
was on. I was like, ever since then, I was like, okay, let's talk about it. But that isn't my default because I do feel for most people that are dealing with that. I think it's a real problem.
yeah, for me, when Shanny's truly miserable and crying and wailing on camera, I feel that she's completely humiliated herself, and I don't want to watch it. So I guess that would be sort of my boundary. I don't want to witness this behavior. Um, or to use the Emo Phillips line, he saw a man digging through a dumpster for food, and he said he couldn't stand watching a man having to rummage through garbage for scraps of food to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So his solution was to give the man a giant raccoon costume. Emo Phillips
Wow.
is great, by the way. He does it in this really weird voice, so it disrupts the joke enough so that you can't see the punchline that's coming. He's really wonderful. But at any rate, I'm getting off topic and boundaries and whatnot, so maybe I should sign off. But it is just really odd that watching this human being put on a show where she debases herself and humiliates herself for an audience. I find that if I do have a line, that's when I'm going to check out.
It's when she's emotional.
Well, I with
Interesting.
anger, I might find that funny, but with
Mm-hmm.
absolute and utter despair, like, oh no, we blew through $700,000,
Yeah.
um, and then just weeping and not knowing what to do. Oh no, we're going to get evicted. What about the kids? I just find that horrible and can't bring myself to watch it.
That's
Um,
interesting. I think my line is a little bit different. I think that there's a little bit of Schadenfreude there, and with the exception of the kids, if the kids weren't involved, I wouldn't feel
mm,
that way. But because of her history of how awful she's been to so many people, and I'm not even talking about my incident. I talked about my incident because I can talk about my incidents, but
yes.
so many people she's been terrible to, and they can talk about their incidents if they want to.
Oh, and her
But
supporters too.
but that how horrible she was to them, there is some Schadenfreude there that I think is is deserved to some degree. Uh, with the exception of the kids, they
Yeah.
never asked to be in that situation, and that's the part that's really sad. And so, like, I think it winds back to, like, I think there's some folks that people deem trolls, that, and including myself, I've been deemed a troll. That if you can't laugh at it, you're going to be just like completely sad. And it's one of those things for me that that isn't my line, but like a line for me, I cringed a lot when Shanny took advantage of Rev and he was completely like out of his mind.
Oh,
Um,
it's so sad, and all that money just gone. And that's a once in a lifetime's situation for most people, or actually, most people never have that opportunity of having a boatload of money given to them, and just all gone. And it's just sad. And I think of it's kind of strange because I think of Shanny as an anglerfish. You know those weird fish that have an antenna and
with
it
the teeth and the antenna, and the like yeah, it's like one light way ahead of it.
yes, and so the light attracts fish, and then the anglerfish eats them. But the thing is how they mate. The males are very small compared to the female anglerfish, and they attach to the body of the female and are parasites. So they literally stick around with the female for the rest of the time, and they're only there to deposit sperm. And I sort of think of Shanny and Rev that way. There's this tiny little Rev that occasionally attaches himself to her. But technically, it's Shanny who's the parasite because she's the one who sucked all that money out of Rev. So, as an analogy, it doesn't quite work. But Shanny as an anglerfish would make an amusing illustration. I don't have the skills to do it, though.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea. He has kind of lost a lot of his identity, like the little bit of identity he did have, and now he's always kind of going identity to identity. But I don't know if you recall the time where he had just had a whole bunch of seizures because she had convinced him that she knew what she was doing, and he was going to quit, cold turkey alcoholism. So he had a bunch of
Oh my God.
surge, and he was out of his mind, and he was like, people were worried about him because he was literally acting like he had lost his brain. And I remember her dressing him up in drag and making Revelina, and he's completely just not like coherent, like, and she's propping him up, and I think that that's a line for me that, like, for me, I felt uncomfortable because I felt like had he been of sound mind, he wouldn't be consenting to it.
Oh God, I'm glad I never saw those particular videos. That would have been really hard to take. Also, Shanny going on and on about her medical training, which probably lasted 2 weeks. She guiding him through cutting cold turkey, which you're not supposed to do. People die going cold turkey from booze all the time. And so she actually almost killed Rev.
Yeah, yeah,
She,
yeah, because you're gonna have seizures, and then it's basically it's like a stroke, kind of like it just messes up your brain.
oh. Do you think, how long do you think before Shani and Rev get kicked out of the uncle's house? Because that's going to happen. They're going to destroy it. Uncle's going to come by, flip out.
I don't
And,
know. We're all wondering, right? She has kids, so that's going to be a factor in, pulling heartstrings and trying to find a way, right? To
well, she will blame the uncle for everything. We can see that coming. And she'll probably, that's not going to work because there's no emotional contact between the uncle and Shani. So it'll
Mhm.
just be absurd. And I imagine he'll evict them.
Right.
But
Missy
I'm
Ann says something that, like, I think is completely like put it in a nutshell of why I think Shanny has been fair game is she like names people specifically multiple times in the past, and with defamation and sexual harassment and spreading docs, those
Oh,
like are cardinal sins, and that's like where like it's a big like whoa, hands are off. I think it was something similar for me. I said cardinal sins because it was in my brain because you were responding to the cardinal sins. But I think it was I think for me that behavior is what makes it hands off. Like, okay, is this what we're gonna do now? But there's still a line for me of how far I'm willing to go. Like, like there's still that
yeah,
line. I'm not going to drop the uncle's house, address down to somebody, like, to 4chan. That's not what I do.
no.
Like there's limits of how far I go with this. And so like, it's interesting because like Missy Ann, for instance, is an example of somebody that Shanny did harm to, who, in my opinion, held back quite a bit. Like, I think there could have been like a bigger tsunami of a pushback than what happened. But considering like who's connected to who and stuff, but like that is an example of something that we did watch go down that was just completely uncalled for. That Shanny was just being a malicious twat. Like there was no reason for it to go that far.
If Missy Ann, if you have a headset, why don't you come and chat? You could tell us a lot about what happened and your own boundaries. With myself, I don't have the problem quite as keen as you folks, because I got banned from Shannys channel recently, and which I consider a badge of honor. Um, but because I can't be a delight in Shannys channel, it's too hard. I just have Shanny. Oh Lord, I just when I'm in Shannys channel, I have to shut talk because I find her so objectionable. But I just don't think I'm a natural target because everybody loves zebras, as you know.
Especially lions. Lions really love
Oh
zebras.
God, I detest lions. You should know that often lions die at the hooves of zebras because we can do a sort of back kick, and if you break a lion's jaw, they'll just die very slowly of starvation. But sometimes, if you're really good, you can hit them so hard that you break a neck, and the lion just drops. But occasionally, we lose some pretty good zebras to lions. It's really awful. And
Right.
Dodovich started about crocodiles. Those are disgusting creatures.
Mm.
Anyway, I've gone off topic again. I think I'm going to sign off, but thanks so much for having me on there, Holy Spackle.
All right.
And
Thanks for popping in. Appreciate it.
it's my pleasure, and don't hesitate to ask if you need a guest, and I'll just provide noise.
Well, I appreciate you popping in. It's not
Oh,
often
my
that we hear
pleasure.
from you. We see you in chats, but we rarely get to see you as a talking head.
Well, I've heard good things about my voice, so I hope my dulcet tones have been met with approval.
Oh,
All right.
I think we had nap time for everybody between us.
Okay.
But I
Thank you.
appreciate it. You do have a good voice. All right. You have a
Thank you.
good day.
Bye bye.
Bye. All right. So, this is one of those things where maybe it would have been better to have a panel conversation about going back and forth on this. But I do appreciate Zebra popping in and having a discussion about it and stuff. And I personally have been introspective about like, where are my lines with it? Why are there some things that I went with Shanny and not others? And why is that? And same with Rev. Why, why did the Stitchy thing bother me, but Vaughn does not? And I think for me, it's a pattern of abuse, and it's how far people take things and how far they go. And it just depends. It has to reach a certain, for me, it has to reach a certain line before I'm willing to hit that, I guess. Cheshire, I wasn't nearly severe on until she made up a lie. She made up a lie regarding uh, sexual assault, accusing somebody who was a victim of sexual assault, which was not true, and then campaigning with that. And then when it was outed as a lie, and Red even contradicted it, it ended up as her backpedaling, saying it was part of a layered argument, and the viciousness of her and the dangerousness of her for like over a year is why I respond to her the way I do. So there has to be for me, I think, because I've been thinking about it for some time, for me, there has to be a pattern of behavior that's established for a certain amount of time, or a certain line that's crossed. I do pay attention to how people treat other people, I've noticed. She is amazing at opening wines. Theo has a video of her opening a wine bottle, and as much as I did say that I had a problem with one of Theo's videos, the wine bottle video is funny. I don't think you need a context for the wine bottle video, because I guess the context would be that they're celebrating that Kyle's going to jail, is what I think is what's happening. But the context is that woman is a savage and does not know how to open a wine bottle, which is absolutely hilarious. Yeah, I know. It's one of those days where it's one of those days where it's an off day. So like on Mondays, it's a really hard day to get a panel of people or people to join and talk. So I totally understand that. So I understand that people are out and about. So I can actually play the video of Cheshire opening the wine bottle. It is really funny. Let me find it. 1 second.
Might as well get it started. We have the wonderful Cheshire. Hello, Cheshire. She's all decked to the nines too for you guys tonight. Look at this.
Hello. This is not to the nines, but I appreciate the sentiment.
8.5. You're solid 8. We'll give you that.
You dick.
Right. So, as much as I did have some critique with the Everything Nice video with Stitchy, that credit for the Chesh video does go to Everything Nice as well. So there you go. But yeah, if you have comments on where you draw your lines, where you go, where you don't go, What is the catalyst of when you finally, throw down and go, white hat troll, or you go really sarcastic, or you tease somebody? Let me know. I'm just curious to know where your lines are, because I found I'm trying to whittle down and decide, like, where are my lines? And I know that I know some of them. I know where how far I'll go and why. But there are some times where I guess what I've been kind of looking at is, where's the catalyst for me where I go, you know what, that's it. Now it's on, versus let's give that person, some understanding for an extended time, for whatever reason. So interesting. Since people were really busy on the run, definitely leave your comments below. If you want me to eat a dick or a bag of dicks, you can definitely leave that comment. I won't delete it. I do get porn spam. That goes away in spam. So if you ever notice, like, there's comments that get like eaten, that's like porn spam goes away. So I don't particularly like that. So that any comment like that will go away. But comments with dissenting opinions or different opinions, or people that have different lines, definitely encourage the comment. It's not a big deal. Anyway, I had hoped that maybe we could get a panel together, but I do understand it is totally a weird time. So I do appreciate those that sat through this and had a conversation. I completely understand the defensiveness of it. I completely understand, like, folks that maybe think it's hypocritical to have a problem with one thing and not the other. I think for me, it seems like it's a pattern for me that causes that, and the severity, and the length of time something happens. But everybody has different lines, and how and why you draw them is interesting. There's external boundaries we draw. There's internal boundaries we draw, and how you draw that is really interesting. So definitely something to at least think about, have conversations with. Definitely encourage you to maybe discuss these things, within your Discord, your social groups, and kind of, see where those are. Yeah, I'm gonna just take off. I have a friend and their kiddos. We're gonna go swimming, and apparently I am making sandwiches, so I gotta go now. So, all right, y'all, you have a good day.